The HOA president slid into a handicapped spot at Walmart and strutted inside like she owned the lot. And her excuse? She said, "I was only going to be there for a minute." Little did she know she'd walk out to find cops towing her car right off the pavement. But let me start from the beginning. Before we dive in, let me know where you're listening from today. The July heat in Trenton County didn't just sit in the air. It clung to your skin like a damp blanket. The asphalt shimmered under the sun, radiating waves that made every parked car look like it was floating. I was just there to pick up a few simple things for a weekend barbecue. Charcoal, steaks, and Linda's favorite deli potato salad. Nothing complicated, nothing dramatic. But life has a funny way of turning ordinary errands into full-blown chaos. I had already circled the Walmart parking lot twice. My old pickup groaned every time I twisted the steering wheel, and my left knee, the one decorated with a lovely souvenir from my military days, throbbed with each press of the pedal. All I wanted was a decent parking spot that wouldn't turn my grocery trip into a half-mile hike. That's when I spotted it, right near the entrance. Bright blue paint, handicapped space, wide and open, practically glowing like a promise. And just as I angled my truck toward it, a massive white SUV swung in from the opposite direction and bulldozed into the spot like it was claiming territory. I didn't even need to see the license plate to know whose car it was. Karen Jameson, president of the Trenton Hills HOA, self-appointed ruler of neighborhood standards and sworn enemy of anything that dared exist outside her version of perfection. Karen treated HOA bylaws like sacred scripture, and she considered herself the only person qualified to interpret them. She once tried to find my elderly neighbor, Mrs. Gable, because her garden gnome was, and I quote, visually disruptive to community harmony. So watching her glide into a handicapped space without hesitation twisted something deep in my gut. I watched her step out of the SUV. Not a limp, not a brace, not even a careful step. She looked like she had just finished a tennis match at a country club. Crisp white outfit, polished sneakers, and a designer handbag hanging off her shoulder like a trophy. Her blonde ponytail was pulled tight enough to make her eyebrows look permanently surprised. She paused for a moment, scanning the lot with that same expression she always wore, like everything she saw technically belonged to her. Then she walked straight into the store. No handicap placard. No do civility plate. Nothing. For a moment, I sat there gripping my steering wheel, arguing with myself. Part of me said, let it go, Frank. Just find another space. Go home. Grill steaks. Drink beer. But another part, the part shaped by 20 years of military service, refused to ignore it. Rules weren't suggestions where I came from, and handicapped spots weren't conveniences. They were lifelines. I thought about friends who came home from deployment, missing pieces of themselves. I thought about my father, who spent his last years struggling to walk but still insisted on grocery shopping independently because it gave him dignity. That blue paint meant something, and Karen was treating it like decoration. I shut off my engine, pulled out my phone, and snapped a clear photo of her SUV. Blue lines, license plate, empty windshield where a placard should have been. Then I dialed the non-emergency police line. I kept my tone calm and professional. I gave him the location, vehicle description, and plate number. The dispatcher thanked me and said an officer would check it out when one was available. I figured it might take a while, so I leaned back in my seat and waited. 15 minutes later, a Trenton County Patrol car rolled quietly into the lot. The officer who stepped out looked young but sharp. His badge read Daniels. He walked around Karen's SUV slowly, checking mirrors and windows. After a moment, he pulled out his ticket book and started writing. A few nearby shoppers slowed down, sensing something interesting might be unfolding. Phones started appearing. Not full crowd level yet, just casual curiosity. Officer Daniels placed the ticket under the windshield wiper and spoke into his radio. I couldn't hear his exact words, but I caught enough. 2 requests. ADA violation. Obstructed accessible parking. Game over. A few minutes later, Karen stormed out of Walmart, pushing a cart filled with bottled water and organic vegetables like she was leading a health revolution. She spotted the ticket instantly. Her expression flipped from confidence to volcanic rage in less than 2 seconds. She ripped the ticket off her windshield and marched straight toward Officer Daniels. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded, waving the paper like it was contaminated. Her voice carried across the entire parking lot. "I am the president of the Trenton Hills Homeowners Association. I have extremely important responsibilities." Officer Daniels barely blinked. "Ma'am, your vehicle is parked in an accessible space without a valid permit. State law requires a placard or registered disability plate." "This is harassment," she snapped. "I was only inside for a minute." "Duration doesn't matter," Daniels replied calmly. "Without proper authorization, the vehicle is subject to citation and towing." Karen scoffed dramatically, gesturing at the empty spot beside her SUV. "There's plenty of space. Nobody needed it." Before I could stop myself, I spoke for my truck. "My wife uses a wheelchair ramp. Those spaces aren't decoration." Karen whipped around, her eyes locking onto me like she had just identified the enemy commander. Recognition flashed across her face. She knew I reported her. Her expression twisted with fury, but before she could unleash it, the rumble of a tow truck rolled into the lot. The driver hopped out and began hooking chains to her SUV like he'd done it 1,000 times before, which he probably had. Karen exploded. "You cannot do this. I know city officials. I will have your badge." Officer Daniels crossed his arms calmly. "You're welcome to discuss that at the impound lot." The crowd had grown now. Several people were filming openly. One teenager whispered something about live streaming. Karen turned in a circle like she was looking for someone to save her. Nobody stepped forward. The tow truck lifted her pristine SUV off the blue pavement, tires dangling in the air like a defeated parade float. Karen shouted, "It's just paint." I answered quietly, but loud enough for her to hear. "It's access." The crowd reacted with a collective murmur. Karen glared at me like she wanted to memorize my face for future revenge. And, judging by her track record, I had a feeling that moment would come back around. The tow truck rolled out of the lot, carrying both her vehicle and her pride down the street. I finally found another parking space, one much farther away, and limped into Walmart for my barbecue supplies. But I had no idea that parking lot moment was about to launch the most chaotic chapter of my life. The next morning, Linda was scrolling through the neighborhood social media page when she let out a low whistle. "Frank," she said, turning her phone toward me, "you've been upgraded to villain status." Karen had posted a long dramatic story claiming she had been stalked and harassed by an unstable former military resident with anger issues. My photo, blurry but recognizable, was attached underneath. The comment section looked like a digital bar fight. Linda snorted. "She says you have a problem with female authority," she said. "The only authority I have a problem with is fake authority," I replied. We decided not to respond. Online arguments were like gasoline on Karen's ego, but ignoring her didn't stop the retaliation. 2 days later, an HOA violation notice appeared taped to our door. Our mailbox color was apparently non-compliant. Fine, $50. Then came another notice about grass height. Another $50. Then garbage placement. Another fine. Each violation was minor but relentless, death by paperwork. Karen wasn't just angry. She was waging psychological warfare. If anything, they multiplied like weeds after rain. Every few days, another notice appeared taped neatly to our front door, like Karen was delivering handwritten invitations to frustration. One morning, it was the mailbox again. Apparently, the freshly painted color I had carefully matched still didn't meet community visual harmony standards. The wording alone made me laugh out loud. Linda stood beside me, sipping her coffee. "Visual harmony," she said, raising an eyebrow. "Your mailbox is black, Frank. It's not performing an interpretive dance." I shrugged. According to Karen, it might be. We paid a fine anyway, not because we agreed with it, but because fighting every tiny accusation would drain our time and energy. Still, I kept records. Every notice, every envelope, every receipt. My cousin Andrew, who practiced real estate law, had drilled that into my head during one of our phone calls. Document everything, he told me. Bullies rely on people getting tired. Evidence is how you outlast them. Andrew had a way of sounding calm while predicting chaos. And deep down, I knew he was right. 3 days later, another notice arrived claiming our rose bushes were spreading beyond their approved boundary zone. I walked outside, stared at the bushes, and wondered if Karen carried a measuring tape in her purse alongside her designer lipstick. Linda laughed as she read the notice. At this point, she said, "I'm impressed by her creativity. I want to laugh with her, but something about the pattern felt darker than simple pettiness." Karen wasn't just issuing violations. She was escalating. That suspicion turned into certainty one night, just after midnight. I woke up to 3 sharp knocks on the front door. Not the polite kind. The kind that instantly flips a switch inside you. Years of service had trained my body to react before my brain fully caught up. I reached for the heavy flashlight I kept beside the bed and moved quietly toward the front entrance. I checked the peephole. Nobody. I opened the door carefully. Taped to the center of it was a thick envelope with the HOA logo stamped across the front. That alone felt wrong. Karen usually delivered her notices during daylight hours, probably so she could enjoy watching reactions through her living room curtains. I peeled the envelope off the door and carried it inside. Linda sat across from me at the kitchen table as I opened it. The fluorescent light above us hummed softly while I unfolded the papers inside. My stomach tightened with every line I read. Notice of intent to place property lien. According to the document, we owed over $2,000 in accumulated fines for repeated violations and hostile behavior toward HOA leadership. If the amount wasn't paid immediately, they would begin legal proceedings to place a lien against our home. Linda's face went pale. "That's impossible," she said. "We paid every fine." "I know," I answered quietly. The document looked official. Legal formatting. Formal language. But something about it felt off. No board signatures. No hearing documentation. No official certification stamp. Just intimidation dressed up as paperwork. I set the papers down and leaned back in my chair. My jaw tightened as anger settled into something colder and more focused. Karen hadn't just crossed a line. She'd sprinted past it. The next morning, I planned to call Andrew and get legal advice. But before I could dial, our doorbell rang. The security camera showed Officer Daniels standing on the porch. I opened the door, surprised but relieved to see him. "Morning, Mr. Castle," he said. "Mind if I come in?" Linda poured him coffee while I laid the fraudulent lien notice on the table. Daniel scanned the pages, his expression growing increasingly serious. "This is illegal," he said finally. "Flat-out intimidation." "That's what we thought," Linda replied. Daniels took a slow sip of coffee, then leaned forward. "There's another reason I'm here," he said. The Walmart incident wasn't isolated. My attention sharpened instantly. "What do you mean?" Daniels lowered his voice slightly. "I'm assigned to a county task force investigating disability placard fraud." Linda and I exchanged a glance. He continued. "We've received multiple reports about counterfeit handicap permits circulating in this area. High-quality ones. Hard to detect without database verification. And you think Karen is involved?" I asked. "We don't think," he said. "We suspect strongly." Daniels explained that several anonymous complaints pointed toward our neighborhood. Investigators had already arrested a small-time identity forger in another county. When they searched his computer, they discovered digital templates for official handicap placards. According to his statement, he sold those templates to a woman connected to Trenton Hills. For $500, Daniels added. He pulled out his phone and showed me a screenshot of the template file. It looked identical to a real state-issued permit. "They're printing them," he said, "selling them to residents who want prime parking without medical qualification." The room fell silent. "This isn't just corruption," Linda said softly. "That's exploitation." Daniels nodded. "We believe the HOA clubhouse is being used as the operations center, but we don't have enough evidence for a search warrant yet." Then he looked directly at me. "Karen already sees you as an enemy," he said. "That makes you valuable to us. If she escalates harassment, it could give us probable cause." I leaned back, staring at the lien notice on the table. My peaceful retirement suddenly felt very far away. "What exactly would you need from me?" I asked. "Documentation," Daniels said. Observations. Let her believe she's winning. Angry people make mistakes. I glanced at Linda. She squeezed my hand gently. We'll help, I said. From that moment on, our lives shifted into quiet preparation mode. I installed additional security cameras around our house. Driveway, backyard, side yard, motion sensors, night vision. If a raccoon sneezed near our trash cans, I know about it. Linda joked that we were turning our home into a military checkpoint, but I saw relief behind her humor. Karen's behavior had already started feeling unpredictable. Within days, small unsettling incidents began. A dead bird appeared on our porch one morning. Another time, Linda found grease smeared across her car door handle. Nothing dramatic enough to prove sabotage, but enough to send a message. Karen was testing boundaries, and she crossed them completely. I stepped outside early one morning to grab the newspaper. My heart dropped instantly. The front tire of my pickup truck was completely flat, not slowly leaking, completely destroyed. A jagged slice cut deep into the rubber sidewall. I crouched beside it, running my fingers along the damage. The cut was clean, deliberate, knife work. Linda joined me moments later, her coffee mug trembling slightly in her hand. She did this, she whispered. We don't know that yet, I said automatically, though we both knew the truth. Check the cameras, she said firmly. Inside, I pulled up the footage on my laptop. My hand shook slightly as I scrolled through the timeline. 2:17 a.m. motion alert triggered. A shadowy figure stepped into our driveway, wearing dark clothing and a hood. Their face remained hidden, but their movements were quick and purposeful. The figure crouched beside my truck. A faint metallic glint flashed under the porch light. Then the tire collapsed with a soft hiss. As the figure stood to leave, their sleeve shifted just enough for a small embroidered patch to catch the camera's infrared glow. I paused the video and zoomed in. Even through grainy resolution, the symbol was unmistakable. The Trenton Hills HOA emblem. I saved the footage, copied it onto a secure drive, and sent it directly to Officer Daniels. He called within minutes. This is exactly what we needed, he said. This connects the harassment to HOA personnel. What happens next? I asked. Surveillance, he answered. And patience. But patience didn't mean helplessness. Linda and I sat together that evening, reviewing HOA bylaws like they were studying for the most boring final exam in history. Revenge is tempting, Linda said carefully, but it has to stay legal. I know, I replied. Hours later, buried deep in a section about community maintenance, I found something unexpected. The HOA permitted use of powered landscaping equipment starting at 6 a.m. on weekdays. The city ordinance didn't allow noise until 7 a.m. The contradiction sat right there in black and white. Linda leaned over my shoulder. Oh no, she said slowly. You're smiling. The next Friday morning, I stood outside my driveway at exactly 5:59 a.m., wearing work gloves and a determined grin. Strapped to my back was my ancient gas-powered leaf blower, a machine loud enough to register on seismographs. The second my watch ticked to 6 o'clock, I pulled the starter cord. The engine roared to life like an angry chainsaw orchestra. I began clearing imaginary leaves with extreme dedication. Within minutes, Karen's bedroom window slammed open. What are you doing? She screamed. I shut off the blower and held up the HOA rulebook. Following regulations, I called cheerfully. Her face twisted into pure, helpless fury. She slammed her window shut. I restarted the blower for 10 glorious seconds before heading inside. Linda hugged me, laughing. You are impossible, she said. Legally impossible, I corrected. But Karen's retaliation was far from finished. And soon, she would make the mistake that destroyed everything. Karen's patience finally snapped after the leaf blower incident. The change wasn't subtle. It was like watching someone quietly drop their polite mask and step fully into obsession. Every time we crossed paths in the neighborhood after that morning, she didn't just glare. She stared with the kind of intensity that made the air feel colder. 3 days later, she cornered me near the community mailboxes. The afternoon sun reflected off rows of identical metal boxes while she stepped directly into my path, arms folded tightly across her chest. "You think you're clever," she said, her voice low and venomous. "I think I follow written rules," I replied evenly. "You have absolutely no idea who you're dealing with," she whispered, leaning closer. "I will make your life miserable. I promise you that." Then she smiled, not the polished neighborhood president smile, but something sharp and unsettling, before walking away. I watched her go, my instincts buzzing like a warning siren. Linda listened carefully when I told her later that evening. "She's escalating emotionally," she said. "That's dangerous. Emotional bullies stop thinking logically, and logical mistakes create evidence," I said. Linda nodded, though her eyes still carried worry. That same night, just after sunset, my phone rang from a blocked number. I answered. Silence. Then a whisper barely loud enough to register. "Tell your wife to watch her step." The call ended. Linda sat beside me when I told her what happened. She didn't panic. She simply reached for my hand and squeezed it firmly. "If they're trying to scare us," she said quietly, "they're about to learn I don't scare easily." I smiled, though the protective instinct inside me flared stronger than ever. I forwarded the call details to Officer Daniels. Within minutes, he responded that it would be logged as intimidation evidence. The game was tightening around Karen, whether she realized it or not. Later that night, another unsettling moment unfolded. A dark sedan crept past our house with its headlights off. It slowed almost to a crawl, paused briefly in front of her driveway, then rolled away. Linda watched from the living room window beside me. "If they want to put on a show," she said, crossing her arms, "we should probably sell tickets." I chuckled softly, but my attention stayed fixed on the cameras feeding into my security monitor. The equipment I installed was already paying off. Every movement, every vehicle, every shadow, recorded and time-stamped. Karen wanted to intimidate us. Instead, she was documenting her own downfall. 2 days later, Officer Daniels visited again. This time, his expression carried a spark of cautious optimism. "We're ready to move forward," he said after sitting down at our kitchen table. Linda poured coffee while Daniels explained the next phase of their investigation. The HOA's annual Donor Appreciation Night was scheduled for the following week. It was their biggest social event of the year, a carefully staged evening designed to flatter wealthy residents into donating money for community improvement projects. Daniels planned to use that event as bait. An undercover detective from another county would attend, posing as a wealthy widow new to the neighborhood. Her cover story would include an elderly disabled mother moving in with her. She would offer a large cash donation to the HOA in exchange for a guaranteed accessible parking spot and a handicap placard without medical approval. Karen's greed, Daniels believed, would override her caution. "If she agrees," he explained, "and accepts payment, we trigger the warrant." Linda leaned forward. "And if she refuses, then we keep building evidence," Daniels said. "But based on her history, we think she'll take the bait." He looked at me. "We also need someone to help control distractions inside the event. Someone Karen already sees as a rival." "You want me there?" I said. "I do," he confirmed. Linda smiled slightly. "I'll help too," she added. Daniels nodded appreciatively. "We'll wire the room. Hidden microphones. Hidden cameras. Everything legally approved once the transaction begins." The plan felt risky, but it was also precise, controlled, professional, and deeply satisfying. The night of the donor appreciation event arrived warm and humid, with faint thunderclouds gathering along the horizon like distant spectators waiting for a show. Linda wore a navy blue dress that matched her calm confidence. I wore a sports jacket that made me feel like I was attending a job interview instead of walking into an undercover sting operation. The clubhouse was decorated with white tablecloths, fake floral centerpieces, and string lights that tried desperately to make the place look upscale. A slideshow screen hung on the far wall, cycling through photos of landscaping projects and smiling board members shaking hands. Karen floated through the room, greeting guests like royalty holding court. Her smile was flawless, her posture perfect, and her eyes scanned every conversation like she was monitoring her territory. When she spotted Linda and me entering, her smile tightened almost invisibly. She gave a polite nod, the kind that looked friendly but carried the emotional warmth of a frozen pond. Detective Miller arrived about an hour later. She played her role flawlessly, elegant, slightly nervous, wealthy enough to attract Karen's attention without appearing suspicious. From across the room, I watched Miller introduce herself. Karen's body language shifted almost instantly. Her posture leaned forward. Her smile widened. Her eyes sharpened with interest. Hook set. Daniels and his surveillance team monitored everything from an unmarked van parked down the street. Microphones hidden inside a flower arrangement captured every word spoken at Karen's preferred conversation table. Another recording device sat inside Miller's purse, disguised as a decorative pen. My job was to distract Karen's closest allies. Her vice president, Martin, proved easy to trap. He hovered near the buffet table, sampling shrimp cocktails like it was a competitive sport. I struck up a long, painfully detailed conversation about sprinkler system water pressure regulations. Within minutes, his eyes glazed over like someone forced to listen to tax code recitations. Across the room, Linda charmed two other board members with stories about Andrew's disastrous attempt at brewing homemade beer. Her natural warmth made her the perfect conversational magnet. Meanwhile, Karen and Miller drifted gradually toward a quieter corner. I couldn't hear them, but I could see the shift happen. Karen leaned closer. Miller opened her purse casually, allowing a thick white envelope to become visible for just a moment. Karen's pupils practically dilated from across the room. Later, Daniels told me that inside the van, the audio came through crystal clear. Miller described her fictional mother's mobility challenges. She expressed concern about parking accessibility. Then she casually mentioned she was prepared to donate $5,000 to the HOA if her mother could receive a guaranteed parking arrangement and a placard without bureaucratic hassle. Silence followed, long enough that Daniels worried Karen might walk away. Then Karen spoke. "The HOA is always eager to assist generous contributors," she said smoothly. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately." That was the moment the warrant became active. Karen guided Miller into the back office inside the clubhouse. Cameras hidden in decorative wall fixtures recorded everything. Inside that office, Miller handed over the envelope containing marked bills. Karen accepted it. Then she explained the process for producing a new handicap placard without medical certification. Every word, every movement, recorded. Outside, Daniels texted me two simple words. Stage 2. My role began. The slideshow projector stood ready inside a small storage closet connected to the main event hall. Daniels had already uploaded files into the system remotely. Instead of community flower displays, the slideshow now contained surveillance footage, including the video of the HOA volunteer slashing my truck tire and financial records showing suspicious cash withdrawals from HOA accounts linked to Karen. Linda quietly guided several guests toward the projection screen under the excuse that a new presentation was about to begin. I stepped into the storage closet and picked up the remote control. My thumb hovered over the power button while my heart pounded in my chest. Point of no return. I pressed the button. The projector flickered to life. Guests turned curiously toward the glowing screen. The first video clip played. Night vision footage of my driveway. The hooded figure approached my truck, the knife glinting under the porch light. The tire is collapsing. Gasps spread through the room. I allowed the clip to loop twice. Then I advanced to the next slide. A still image zoomed tightly onto the HOA patch stitched onto the vandal's sleeve. Murmurs erupted across the room. Then came the financial documents. Large red highlights marked repeated $5,000 cash withdrawals authorized by Karen. Guests began whispering louder, confusion turning into suspicion. That's when Karen and Detective Miller walked back into the main hall. Karen froze instantly when she saw the screen. Her face was drained of color. And, right on cue, the clubhouse doors burst open. Police. Search warrant. Nobody moves. Officer Daniels and multiple uniformed officers flooded the room. Panic exploded like shattered glass. Guests shouted. Chairs scraped across tile floors. Martin dropped his shrimp cocktail tray directly onto his own shoes. Karen reacted faster than anyone expected. She ran. Karen's heels struck the tile floor in sharp, frantic bursts as she bolted toward the rear exit of the clubhouse. The polished composure she usually wore like armor shattered instantly, replaced by raw survival panic. "Stop! Police!" Daniel shouted behind her. She didn't even hesitate. Guests scrambled out of her path while officers split into pursuit teams. The entire event hall dissolved into chaos. Chairs tipped over, drinks spilled, conversations turned into shouting and confused speculation. I followed at a distance, adrenaline buzzing through my chest, while Linda stayed behind with the other guests. Daniels had already instructed her to remain in the main hall once the operation triggered. Karen shoved through the rear emergency doors and sprinted across the dimly lit courtyard toward the detached HOA maintenance garage. Her pace slowed slightly when her heel caught on uneven pavement, but she yanked the shoe off and kept running barefoot. She knew exactly where she was going. That realization sent a chill through me. By the time I reached the courtyard exit, 2 officers had already cut around the building to block the far side. Daniels chased directly behind Karen, radio crackling with coordinated commands. "North side secured," one voice announced through the radio. "Approaching garage access," another officer confirmed. Karen slammed into the side door of the maintenance garage and disappeared inside just seconds before Daniels reached it. He yanked the door open and entered cautiously. I stayed just outside, watching through the open doorway while uniformed officers spread around the structure. The interior lights flickered on, revealing shelves stacked with landscaping tools, storage bins, and maintenance equipment. Karen stood near the back wall, chest heaving, eyes darting wildly between exits. For a brief moment, nobody moved. Daniel stepped forward slowly, his voice calm but firm. "Karen Whitmore, you're under investigation for fraud, extortion, and multiple counts of conspiracy. Step forward and place your hands where I can see them." Her gaze flicked around the garage like a trapped animal searching for escape routes that no longer existed. "You don't understand," she said, her voice trembling between rage and desperation. "I built this neighborhood. I protected property values. I made this community desirable. You abused authority," Daniels replied evenly. She shook her head violently. "No, I maintained order. People like you don't understand what it takes to keep standards high." Daniels took another step forward. "This ends tonight." Karen's composure collapsed completely. Her shoulders sagged. Her breathing slowed into shaky bursts. For a split second, it looked like she might surrender. Then her eyes shifted toward a metal filing cabinet positioned along the sidewall. She lunged for it. Officers reacted instantly, but she yanked open the top drawer and grabbed a thick folder before anyone could reach her. Papers spilled across the concrete floor as she clutched the folder tightly against her chest. "You think I'm going down alone?" she shouted, her voice cracking. Daniel stopped advancing, studying her carefully. "What's in the folder, Karen?" "Everything," she snapped. "Records, payments, deals. Half the board is involved." The garage fell silent, except for the faint hum of fluorescent lights overhead. Karen laughed suddenly, a brittle, hollow sound. "They all wanted favors," she continued. "Preferred parking, violation dismissals, contractor kickbacks. I just organized it." Daniels nodded slowly. "Then give us the folder." She hesitated. The room seemed to hold its breath. Finally, her hands loosened. The folder slipped from her grip and landed heavily on the floor. Officers moved in quickly, securing her wrists with handcuffs. Karen didn't resist this time. As they guided her toward the exit, her eyes briefly locked onto mine, standing in the doorway. The hatred in her stare had drained away, replaced by something emptier. For the first time since I met her, she looked small. The raid continued for hours. Inside the garage, officers uncovered boxes filled with forged placards, cash envelopes labeled with resident addresses, and detailed ledgers documenting illegal transactions spanning nearly 4 years. By midnight, several additional board members had been detained for questioning. Martin, still smelling faintly of seafood and panic, was escorted out in handcuffs after attempting to claim he was only following administrative guidance. The donor event transformed into an impromptu witness gathering. Guests provided statements. Surveillance teams cataloged evidence. News vans began lining the entrance road after police scanners picked up the operation. Linda eventually joined me outside, near the patrol vehicles. She slipped her hand into mine, squeezing gently. "It's over," she whispered. I nodded, though exhaustion was already creeping into my bones. "Almost," I replied. The investigation expanded rapidly over the following weeks. Karen faced a staggering list of charges including fraud, extortion, vandalism, conspiracy, witness intimidation, and illegal sale of government-issued disability permits. Financial audits exposed widespread embezzlement within HOA accounts. Several contractors admitted to paying kickbacks in exchange for guaranteed maintenance contracts. Andrew assisted us in preparing testimony and ensuring every piece of documentation we had collected was properly submitted to prosecutors. "You two did exactly what most people don't," he told us during one meeting. "You refused to be bullied quietly." Linda smiled at that, though she still carried lingering tension anytime she saw unfamiliar cars pass our house. The courtroom proceedings began 3 months later. Karen entered wearing a conservative gray suit, her hair styled perfectly as always, but the confident authority she once radiated had faded into rigid defensiveness. Multiple former board members sat at separate tables, each represented by their own attorneys, each trying to distance themselves from the growing mountain of evidence. The prosecution presented video recordings from the donor night sting operation first. Miller's undercover conversation played across courtroom monitors with crystal clarity. Karen's voice calmly explaining the illegal placard arrangement echoed through the silent room. Then came the financial records. Then the forged permit manufacturing equipment. Then the vandalism footage from my driveway. By the time Daniels testified about the garage raid and evidence seizure, Karen's legal defense had shifted from denial to damage control. The trial lasted 8 days. The verdict took less than 3 hours. Guilty on every major charge. Karen received a multi-year prison sentence, heavy financial restitution penalties, and permanent prohibition from holding any residential board position in the state. Several other board members accepted plea deals involving fines, probation, and mandatory ethics oversight requirements. The Trenton Hills HOA board dissolved entirely pending restructuring under court supervision. 6 months later, spring arrived quietly across the neighborhood. New HOA leadership focused mostly on routine maintenance and transparency meetings that residents actually enjoyed attending. The atmosphere shifted from tense surveillance to cautious rebuilding. Our rose bushes bloomed brighter than ever that season. One Saturday morning, Linda and I sat on our porch drinking coffee while watching a group of children ride bicycles down the sidewalk. The sunlight warmed the wooden railing while birds chirped from nearby maple trees. "Peaceful," Linda said softly. "Finally," I agreed. She leaned her head against my shoulder. "You know," she added, "you never finished repainting that mailbox after the violation notice." I glanced toward it. The black paint had faded slightly under months of weather. I smiled. "Maybe I'll repaint it bright purple," I joked. Linda laughed. "Please do. I'd love to see the new HOA try to regulate that." We sat quietly for a while, listening to the neighborhood settle into normal life again. For the first time since moving to Trenton Hills, it truly felt like home. Life in Trenton Hills didn't magically transform overnight after the trial. Peace returned slowly, cautiously, like a neighborhood relearning how to breathe after holding tension for far too long. For weeks after Karen's sentencing, conversations happened in hushed clusters along sidewalks and driveways. Residents who had once avoided eye contact with each other now stopped to talk. Some out of relief, some out of lingering disbelief, and some out of guilt for things they had ignored. Linda noticed a shift before I did. "People are standing straighter," she said one morning while watering the roses. "Like they're not worried about being watched anymore." She was right. The change wasn't loud or dramatic. It was subtle. Lawns still got mowed. Mail still got delivered. Dogs still barked at squirrels like it was their sworn duty. But the invisible pressure that once hovered over the neighborhood had lifted, and people noticed. The court appointed a temporary oversight committee to rebuild the HOA from scratch. Instead of hand-picked insiders, the committee required open elections, public financial records, and monthly resident forums where anyone could speak without time limits or approval forms. The first community meeting under the new system packed the clubhouse. Standing room only. I sat beside Linda while neighbors took turns at the microphone, some nervous, some emotional, some openly angry about years of intimidation they had quietly endured. One elderly resident admitted she had paid over $3,000 in fabricated landscaping fines because she feared retaliation. A young couple explained they nearly sold their home after being threatened with repeated violations over their child's wheelchair ramp. Every story added another layer to the truth we already knew. Karen hadn't just enforced rules. She had built fear into policy. About halfway through the meeting, something unexpected happened. Several residents approached Linda and me during a break. Not to praise us, not dramatically, just simple, sincere gratitude. A retired teacher hugged Linda and whispered, "You gave us our neighborhood back." A quiet widower shook my hand with both of his and said, "I thought I was the only one she targeted." Those small moments hit harder than any courtroom verdict, because they reminded me this fight had never just been about us. Andrew visited that summer for a long weekend. He stood in our backyard flipping burgers while examining the neighborhood with professional curiosity. "I've handled dozens of HOA corruption cases," he said between flipping patties. "Most end quietly. Settlements. Confidential agreements. Residents just move away. Why was this one different?" Linda asked. Andrew smirked slightly. "Because you two didn't leave, and you documented everything like paranoid librarians." I laughed. High praise coming from a lawyer. "It is," he confirmed. "Also, for the record, you've become mildly famous in a very niche legal seminar circuit." Linda nearly dropped the lemonade pitcher. "Famous?" she repeated. "Relax," Andrew said. "You're not signing autographs. But your case is being used in HOA ethics training seminars across the state." Linda burst out laughing. "Frank," she said, nudging me, "you're educational material now." Late that summer, construction crews arrived to renovate the clubhouse. The new HOA board voted to redesign the space completely. The private executive office Karen once used as her command center was demolished and replaced with a glass-walled community workspace where residents could review records openly. Transparency by architecture. Linda loved that phrase. A new plaque was installed near the entrance reading, "Trenton Hills Community Center, dedicated to fairness, accessibility, and shared respect." Simple words, but they meant everything. The most surprising change happened the following spring. A new resident moved into Karen's old house. The neighborhood buzzed with quiet curiosity for weeks leading up to the arrival. People speculated endlessly. Would the house sit empty forever? Would some corporate rental company buy it? Would anyone even want to live there after everything that happened? The moving truck arrived on a bright Saturday morning. Linda and I watched from our porch as boxes were unloaded and furniture carried inside. Eventually, a middle-aged woman stepped out of the driver's side of a small hybrid SUV. She wore comfortable sneakers, oversized sunglasses, and the relaxed confidence of someone used to starting fresh. Two teenage boys followed her out of the house arguing about where to set up a gaming console. Linda leaned closer to me. "They look normal," she whispered. "Shocking," I said dryly. Later that afternoon, the woman walked across the street toward our porch holding a covered dish. I stood as she approached, extending her hand warmly. "Hi," she said. "I'm Marisa. I just moved in today. I figured meeting neighbors early is better than wondering who hates loud moving trucks." Linda laughed instantly and invited her to sit. The dish turned out to be homemade lasagna. During conversation, Marissa revealed she worked as an occupational therapist specializing in mobility rehabilitation. She had chosen Trenton Hills specifically because of its recent accessibility reform efforts and community reputation improvements. The irony nearly made me choke on my iced tea. Karen's former house, now owned by someone dedicating her career to helping people with disabilities. Life has a wicked sense of poetic timing sometimes. Months passed. The neighborhood barbecue tradition returned after nearly 5 years of cancellation. Children played tag across multiple front yards while adults shared folding chairs, drinks, and stories that no longer carried whispered tension. Linda became unofficial coordinator of the event purely because she enjoyed organizing potluck sign-up sheets. I handled grill duty, which mostly meant burning one batch of hot dogs while everyone politely pretended not to notice. At one point during the evening, I stepped away from the crowd and stood near the edge of the cul-de-sac, watching laughter echo between houses glowing under string lights. Daniels walked up beside me holding a paper plate stacked with food. "Nice turnout," he said. "Feels different," I replied. He nodded. "You know, investigations like yours don't usually end with community healing," he added. "Most stay divided. Why didn't this one?" I asked. Daniels studied the gathering for a moment. "Because fear thrives in silence," he said. "And you two were very, very loud about fairness." That fall, Linda finally convinced me to repaint the mailbox. She handed me color samples like she was selecting paint for the Sistine Chapel. After 30 minutes of debate, "Issues purple," bright, ridiculously bold, impossible to ignore. Linda laughed so hard she had to sit down on the driveway while I painted it. When I finished, the mailbox stood like a tiny rebellious monument at the edge of our lawn. A few neighbors applauded jokingly when they walked past. Marissa even brought over decorative gold house numbers to match it. One quiet evening, nearly 2 years after Karen's arrest, Linda and I sat on the porch again, just like we had countless times before. Autumn leaves drifted across the street while porch lights flickered on one by one. "Have you ever thought about how close we came to moving away?" Linda asked. "Sometimes," I admitted. She rested her hand over mine. "I'm glad we stayed." I looked down the street at children riding bikes beneath glowing streetlights, neighbors chatting casually on sidewalks, and Marissa walking her elderly therapy client through mobility exercises near the cul-de-sac. "I am too," I said, "because homes aren't just walls and roofs. They're the people who refuse to let fear decide who belongs there. And sometimes, standing your ground doesn't just protect your house. It rebuilds an entire community."